To a generation of young women, Edward Cullen was the epitome of bangability. Bear with me, lesbians. But it seems pretty bizarre that an elderly Mormon vampire who abstains till marriage would become a major sex symbol and instigator of the paranormal romance boom of the late 2000s. But in reality, it was abstinence that made Edward sexy. Imagine you're a teenage girl, you feel misunderstood, you're coming into your sexuality, the smelly teenage boys around you are eager to bang but can't really even hold down an intelligent conversation. And along comes Edward. Okay, he's like 100 years older than you and that's super freaking problematic, but really, he's not. That's not really the idea.
How long have you been 17?
A while.
In this magical sense, he's not 109, he's 17. Forever 17. His frontal cortex will never develop beyond that. And because he's been 17 for so long, he's from another time, when men were more chivalrous. Whether we're talking about Edward, or Angel from Buffy, or Bill from True Blood, that's the real appeal.
And if I'd have met you back then, I would have courted you.
Your vampire boyfriend desires you, yes, but he's too well-mannered to pressure you into anything. And by desire, I mean, he wants to suck you dry like a Capri Sun. Vampirism has always been sexy, and it's an easy allegory for sex. Whether you're reading Dracula or Carmilla, or watching Twilight or Buffy, the bite is a penetration, an exchange of fluids. Edward is scared to do anything sexy with Bella in case it excites his bloodlust. Both sex and the first bite must wait until marriage. And of course the vampire is powerful, he's magic, he could tear you in half at any moment, but he would never do that. If you say no, he will always stop.
If you ever touch her against her will again, wait for her to say the words.
What makes Edward and the others hot is that they respect your consent and your safety. They could hurt you, but they never would. Maybe he will bite you one day, but only once you're married and when you explicitly ask him to. Obviously, Twilight is far from being unproblematic, but this is the appeal. The strong, handsome boy who respects your boundaries. He's got those big, scary teeth, but he'll never use them on you. Not without your consent. So anyway, Netflix has a new lesbian vampire show. This is so exciting. With such a massive backlog of vampire romance to take inspiration from and improve upon, this is bound to be an unproblematic fave. Oh. Fuck. First Kill is the story of Juliet, a teen vampire who falls for Calliope, a teen monster hunter. Juliet was born a vampire to a vampire family, and Calliope is from a family of monster hunters. It's like Buffy and Angel in a Romeo and Juliet setup, so we get two households who hate each other while their kids are falling in love. Juliet fancies Calliope but has barely ever spoken to her. Luckily, an awkward spin the bottle session lands them in a pantry so they get to aggressively make out. They've both decided to kill each other in the pantry while everyone is standing outside waiting for them to finish snogging. But unfortunately for us, they both survive and the show goes on for another 7 episodes. Calliope tells her mum about what happened, who then gets the family together for a vampire slaying raid where 7 human monster hunters wearing sunglasses in the middle of the night try to kill 30 super vampires. They fail. Meanwhile, a creepy babysitter assaults Calliope, who knocks him out. The girls incorrectly assume he's dead, despite the fact that Juliet can hear heartbeats.
I can hear your heartbeat.
But I guess the writers forgot about that. Oh well. The girls put him in the trunk of the car, only to later be attacked by him because he's not dead and was never dead. Juliet kills him and drinks his blood, and they bury him in the woods, which is apparently a huge turn on for both of them, so they bang against a tree. This makes them a couple, and they love each other very much, regardless of the fact that, at the raid, Juliet's family has just killed Calliope's Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mike, who are never mentioned again because it would just be awkward and/or the writers forgot about them. The families make a truce, even though the vampires could easily kill the monster hunters in like 5 seconds. But they have to stretch this shit out for another 4 episodes, so we're gonna ignore that. Juliet's evil exiled brother has come back to town and turned one of Juliet's friends into a zombie who attacks the school. At this point we learn 5 episodes in that actually the entire world already knows monsters exist and has for the entire show so far. There are some vague hints at this before episode 5, but it's never clear at all. The writers just didn't think this was a big enough deal to mention, and/or they forgot to tell us. When Calliope's brother Theo is accidentally stabbed in the belly by her other brother Apollo while trying to kill a vampire, no one calls an ambulance and they immediately decide he's dead, even though Juliet can hear heartbeats. They just don't notice that he is not dead. This all happens in a public restroom. Luckily, no one at the bar notices the apparent murder that has happened in the girls' loo, so they clean up and leave his corpse in a toilet stall, but Juliet somehow suddenly realizes he's not dead and goes back. Instead of calling an ambulance, she drinks his blood to try and give him a more dignified death, and then apparently leaves his corpse in the toilet, once again assuming he's dead. But not only does he come back to life as a vampire immediately, but somehow is teleported to his house and cleans himself up before Calliope gets home, without he himself noticing that he has died or that he's been turned into a vampire. Calliope gets upset that Juliet saved Theo's life by turning him into a vampire because Theo doesn't like vampires, so that's bad. This is way more upsetting to Calliope than Uncle Mike and Aunt Sarah being killed, which she has never acknowledged. The girls break up, and Theo's mum gives him to Juliet's evil brother to look after, and the season ends on a cliffhanger. People have been psyched about First Kill for a while. It's an exciting premise. And sure, it's turned out to be objectively terrible, but it's bad in a good way, right? It's so bad that it's good. It's bad good. It's fine. It's totally fine. I'm fine. This is fine. At the age of 16, Juliet is only now starting to require blood to get through the day. It's time for her first kill, her parents tell her. If she doesn't start killing now, she'll get too hungry and lose control and end up killing someone by mistake.
It isn't that hard. Just choose someone.
Margot.
But Juliet doesn't want to kill a human. She likes humans. She is a human friend. If you had to kill to survive, would you want to survive at all? This is a complex ethical question, one which has been at the core of vampire fiction for half a century now. Bram Stoker's Dracula was the Antichrist. He was the embodiment of evil. But once vampires lost this religious meaning, they became free to make their own individual choices. There can now be good vampires, there can be bad vampires, there can be morally complex vampires with expensive haircuts. The main factor that marks modern vampires as benevolent is the change in their diet. In modern fiction, a vampire is good when they suppress their instinct and find more ethical alternatives to killing humans. They become a vegetarian vampire. They hunt animals instead of humans. They drink donated or synthetic blood, drink from consenting humans or other vampires. This usually comes at a cost. They're never fully satiated, their powers get weaker, or they're at least condemning themselves to a life of boring, flavorless food.
Oh, it tastes like shit!
Keeps you strong, but you're never fully satisfied.
It's a battle of mind versus body, it's self-discipline, and it's moral sacrifice. Every era of vampire fiction reflects the society of the time. When the current cultural aspiration is productivity, working out, a skincare routine, and eating healthy, is it any wonder we like vampires who are also desperately trying to discipline their bodies and diets? And food is very intimate, right? It's very telling. Food and eating are essential to self-identity and are instrumental in the definition of family, class, ethnicity. First Kill creator V.E. Schwab said the show isn't about gay identity, it's about personal identity, about finding yourself. What could be more formative for a young vampire than her food choices? And what could be more lesbian than being a vegetarian? But while in theory Juliet is against murder, in practice, she drinks a lot of blood. She bites and even kills people. It's actually very easy to persuade her too. It only took a quick conversation with her sister Eleanor to convince her to bite Calliope. It's only 25 minutes into episode 1 and our vampire's already broken the most important rule of vampire romance. Don't try to kill your crush on the first date. That's not sexy. That's not the fantasy. Well, I can already see the comments. The comment section about this. Why are you guys like this? She kills a bad guy even though she could use her magic vampire blood to paralyze him instead. She drinks from Calliope's brother, supposedly to give him a dignified death, instead of just calling an ambulance and not letting him die. Eleanor gets her to participate in killing a random guy in a bar, and she's gobbling up the blood pills her mum buys her in back alleys. I love the idea of Margot, this elegant ancient vampire lady, going to a back alley and doing like a shady deal for some blood pills when she just kills people all the time anyway, I guess. So like, why did she need to do that? It's so... Ugh. My point is, for someone who's supposedly against killing, Juliet does a fair amount of it.
It felt right.
She only explicitly turns down humans offered to her twice. She is putting off her first kill, but it's very hard to take that seriously when she doesn't do a single thing to look for alternatives. In the show, we see plenty of options. We see vampires can feed from other vampires, from consenting humans, that blood can be bought. This family is so freaking rich, I'm sure she could just pay someone to let her nibble on their arm once a week. Oh, that sounds like a pretty sweet job. I could see myself doing that. This YouTube thing doesn't work out. Maybe she could strike a deal with a friend or a lover, or just find one of the freaks in my comment section. There are so many options, and she's not even thinking about any of them. She's just passively accepting what her family gives her. When Juliet's outcast brother Oliver is first mentioned, and they say how he played with dead squirrels, my co-writer Ada and I thought, oh, cool, okay. The family ostracized him because he eats animals instead of humans, and he'll show up and give Juliet an alternative way of living as a vampire.
You don't have to live like this, Jules.
But no, he actually turns out to be even more evil for no reason whatsoever, except it's a convenient plot device. There is no vegetarian vampire in this show. But as a viewer, I can't help but feel like there should be. Audiences these days are very genre savvy. This isn't 19th century Dracula where you can just make shit up. If you have a vampire who refuses to attack humans, viewers will go, well, why isn't she eating animals like Edward? Why isn't she using bags of donated blood like Angel? All of this is even more jarring because there is no in-universe indication that pursuing any of the possible alternatives would be in any way detrimental to her. As far as we know, Juliet could be a vegetarian vampire with absolutely no sacrifice to her well-being or powers. There's less at stake for her than Edward or Bill or Stefan, and yet she's not even making an effort. In the language of the modern vampire, that means she's being sold to us as a noble Edward Cullen vegetarian, but her behaviour is actually much closer to a Victoria. I hate how much this show's making me defend Twilight. I don't like Twilight. I don't even like it. In fact, First Kill is not even making a convincing argument for the fact that she needs to drink blood at all. I know that sometimes they change the light bulbs to red to indicate she's hungry, but that's not a real sacrifice she's making because those hungry moments have zero consequence and always go away whenever she becomes mildly distracted by anything.
But it's getting worse. Every day, the world is a little sharper. Just when I think it's too much, I bumped into you.
Savannah's #1 station for news you need to know. Oliver, let her go!
I think one of the reasons why First Kill's ethical posturing fails is because they don't give us an equivalent of the vegetarian vampire. The ethical premise at the center of this show is supposed to be the girls starting to question the morality of their murderous families. But Juliet never finds an alternative to killing, and Calliope only makes an exception for Juliet. But you know what? Who cares if the writing can't follow through on its own premise? At least this show is good representation. In interviews, First Kill's cast and producers spend a lot of time talking about how this show is good representation. It's important for the LGBT community to see themselves in a show that's like Buffy, but with more prominent lesbians. But is it good representation? While I think the main characters are fine representation, I guess, even if they are boring and terribly written, I find myself a little uncomfortable when it comes to the character Noah.
Your reality is Noah, a straight boy with a girlfriend, which makes you a side piece in a closet he's not coming out of.
Juliet's gay best friend Ben has been hooking up with this straight guy Noah. Noah has a girlfriend, but he secretly hooks up with Ben a lot. Ben is determined to make Noah his official boyfriend, even though Noah has set boundaries. He says they're not dating, he is committed to his girlfriend, he doesn't want anything serious with Ben, and he definitely doesn't want to come out. So immediately after he says this, he's brutally murdered by a zombie while the cutesy theme music plays in the background. His death is definitely meant to be a punishment. We also see with the creepy guy Juliet kills that this is the kind of show where bad guys get punished for being bad. It's that sort of writing. There are two ways to see Noah, I think. The first option, he is gay and he is scared to be out. So he thinks he will spend the rest of his life pretending to like girls while he stays closeted, which is very sad, in my opinion. I don't think that's a reason to punish Noah. I think that's actually a really mean-spirited narrative. The other option would be that he's bisexual. He's scared to come out and refuses to choose Ben over his girlfriend, and that's why he's punished. But Noah is a kid living in the south of the US. He's like 16. Death seems like a slightly severe punishment in this context. I can kind of understand if this were like a middle-aged politician cheating on his wife and voting for homophobic legislation like in True Blood, but this is about a kid. Like, why? In a show trying to sell itself entirely on being good representation for teenagers, it just feels kind of cruel. V. Schwab has said repeatedly that this is the kind of show she would have needed as a teen, but I guess this show's only for kids who have accepting parents and not for kids too frightened to come out. Otherwise, homophobia doesn't seem to exist in this world. No one appears to be homophobic. The girls are just out. They never talk about gay problems. There's only one scene in episode 5 where they talk for a little bit about coming out, but that's it for like the entire series.
I was marrying Bruno Mars, but it turns out I like girls that look like Bruno Mars.
But is that true, Calliope? Because there are no girls in this who look like Bruno Mars, including your ex-girlfriend. In fact, of the 3 queer girls in this show, all of them are very high femme. For a show about representation trying to express queer girls' sexualities in a positive way, why are all of these girls femmes? It feels like paying lip service to the idea of butch girls, but where are they? Imagine if Juliet had been a butch vampire teenager. How fun would that be? Do we really need another show where the beauty standards for women are this particular and this high? Is that feminist? Is that queer? But even if this show fails at understanding basic concepts of romance and like compassion, at least the show cleverly comments on the trope of the lesbian vampire. It does not. That was a clever lie to throw you off the scent. In fact, I think this show is actually rather unaware of its relationship to that trope. In the 1970s, there was a boom of lesbian vampire films which reflected the straight man's anxieties surrounding the feminist movement of the era. What could be more scary than a woman who doesn't need or want a man? We made a whole video on the history of the lesbian vampire trope, so be sure to check that out. On the other hand, the paranormal romance craze of the noughties echoed women's anxieties about men's sexualities. First Kill is different from both of these. It was created by a lesbian, about a lesbian vampire, with a lesbian audience in mind. So what anxieties does First Kill explore? In the 2019 adaptation of Carmilla, it's not lesbianism that makes Carmilla monstrous as it was in the original short story. The film is sympathetic to her and instead portrays the religious homophobes trying to keep the girls apart as the real monsters. But what is First Kill going for? Schwab said in an interview discussing queer representation,
the queers, we're always given like subtext, and I'm like, I don't want subtext.
Yeah. But this show is also committed to giving us a story that isn't about being gay. These characters just happen to be gay. It's about finding your personal identity, not your gay identity. And they take this concept so far that any culture around queerness or homophobia is completely pushed aside to make way for the vampire story. But at the same time, vampirism becomes a gay allegory in the show. So in a lot of ways, it does feel like queerness is subtext. When 2 teens are killed by monsters, some mums band together to protect the town. They form an organisation called the MAMS, which the Daily Beast suggests might be intended to be a MAGA or QAnon satire. Either way, they're clearly meant to be stupid homophobic conservatives, but in universe, this doesn't really make sense. There really are monsters in this town, and they're killing teenagers. And not enough is being done about it because the DA is a monster lover. He's a vampire who eats people. Just your average politician, really. The thing is, what the Karens want is actually entirely reasonable and apolitical. Before the girls were born, Bunny and everyone in this town were horribly traumatized by the city being overrun with monsters. You couldn't leave your home. That's terrifying. Bunny has every reason to be scared and to want to do something about it. But the show makes these women out to be ridiculous, despite the fact that their motivations are hardly different from the Monster Hunter family, who we're supposed to think are so cool. This is one of the show's few attempts at satire, and it's just nonsense. It doesn't work because subtextually, the MAMS are supposed to represent idiotic homophobes, but textually, their motivations make complete sense. So we're just making fun of people who are actually good people because the writers decided it would be funny to have a hillbilly Karen homophobe while they refuse to engage with homophobia in the text. I also have a lot of questions about homophobia in this world. Like, the vampires and the monster hunters really are steeped in tradition. Wouldn't they have views on homosexuality? The vampires in particular are from a culture with arranged marriage and matriarchal inheritance.
Heirs. 5. Unless the first is a girl, then 3.
What if the first 3 are sons?
Then you keep trying. It's your responsibility to carry on the Atwood lineage.
Doesn't that sound like the vampires would have certain views about homosexuality? At least grandma. Or they could be super queer and have very alternative lifestyles. If they do, we didn't see that at all. They seem very straight and very old-fashioned. Obviously, Juliet and Calliope are a couple, so being lesbian isn't subtextual in this show. But if the lesbian vampire once expressed men's anxieties about women's independence, sexual or otherwise, First Kill's lesbian vampire represents anxieties about parental homophobia. The parents trying to keep the girls apart is an allegory for homophobic parents who don't approve of their kids' sexualities. People have praised this show for giving us gay star-crossed lovers where it isn't their gayness that's keeping them apart. But if we look at what the vampirism in First Kill represents, it turns out it kind of is their gayness that's keeping them apart. When Calliope's parents talk about why she's not allowed to be with Juliet, they use very familiar language about how Calliope is a good girl, she was just tricked and seduced by Juliet, this is not who Calliope really is. They even perform a procedure on Calliope awfully reminiscent of electroshock conversion therapy. In this show, homosexuality isn't subtext, but homophobia is, which I can see the benefit of if you want to watch something gay with no homophobia, except that in this case, it significantly weakens the rest of the story. Bunny is like a homophobic MAGA Karen, but at the same time, she's super supportive of gay people, and she's seen as a joke for trying to protect her loved ones from monsters, even though the monsters are 100% real, and the threat is 100% real.
You're acting like a bigoted monster phobe. That's not gonna keep me safe.
Why does Ben call Bunny a monster phobe when there's no precedent in this world for a good monster? There's no monsters' rights movement. It's just gibberish. Bunny has no reason to think monsters can be anything but dangerous. And also, like, why doesn't a monsters' rights movement exist? In HBO's 2008 series True Blood, vampires have recently come out of the coffin. The first scene of the first episode sets up this whole world in which there is a political movement for vampire rights. Vampires are everyday people who buy synthetic blood from the convenience store.
We're citizens. We pay taxes. We deserve basic civil rights just like everyone else. Now that the Japanese have perfected synthetic blood, which satisfies all of our nutritional needs, there is no reason for anyone to fear us. That's why we decided to make our existence known. We just want to be part of mainstream society.
The first 2 minutes of True Blood manages to establish more complex and coherent world building than First Kill manages in the entire season. One of the rights vampires in True Blood are demanding is marriage equality, a clear nod to the LGBT marriage equality campaigns of the time. Vampirism is an allegory for gayness, for race, but gayness and race are also explicitly addressed outside of that. In the first season, we meet a middle-aged vampire accountant named Eddie, who was married to a woman when he realized he was gay, got a divorce, and tried to find love in the gay community. Unfortunately,
most of the gays I come across, they look like you. You're what we're supposed to look like.
Gay male culture isn't very welcoming to men who look like Eddie. He wanted to become a vampire because he figured that's the only way for him to get guys' attention.
And I saw this one guy, he was even less of a looker than me. And he had beautiful young men all over him. Somebody told me he was a vampire. I guess I just thought, well, that's for me.
Becoming a vampire does open the door to hookups for Eddie, but they are transactional. Eddie's story is wonderfully written and moving. True Blood takes its detailed vampire world and asks, how would this world interact with gay culture? It's intersectional vampirism. It's clearly written by a gay creator with an intimate understanding of gay beauty ideals and gay intra-community dynamics, whereas First Kill can't even manage to give us consistent world building, let alone have it intersect with gayness in a clever way. In True Blood, you can be anti-vampire and anti-gay, but in First Kill, you can only be anti-vampire. It's fine to create a story where queerness isn't the focus, but that doesn't mean completely removing all societal context around what it means to be gay. It makes gay characters feel shallow and superficial, and it makes for even weaker stories. But maybe we're being too hard on First Kill. Some fans have defended the show saying, it's not bad, it's just camp. And you know what? Maybe that's the case. Maybe the reason the sound design is so bad you can barely hear the actors sometimes is because the show is just campy. Maybe creating massive continuity errors like clocks indicating that people are moving across town at super speed or even sometimes moving backwards in time somehow is just fun campness. Maybe Juliet incorrectly assuming on multiple occasions that people are dead despite the fact that she can hear their heartbeats is just because the show is camp. Maybe the title sequence with the bad drawings and the 2003 filter in a show which has nothing to do with drawing isn't cheap and lazy, it's just an intentional nod to the art form that is camp. Camp has always been connected to gay culture, so maybe First Kill is following the footsteps of a beloved gay tradition. So what exactly is camp? In her seminal essay, Susan Sontag wrote, "Camp is a vision of the world in terms of style, but a particular kind of style. It is the love of the exaggerated, the off, of things being what they are not. Camp is the attempt to do something extraordinary, but extraordinary in the sense often of being special, glamorous. Camp is also playful. It's serious about frivolous things and frivolous about serious things. It goes beyond satire to exposing and celebrating artifice. Think of drag, exposing and playing with the performativity of gender." Sontag distinguishes between two different types of camp, naive and deliberate. Deliberate camp is obviously intentional, whereas naive camp is trying to do something serious but fails really, really badly. As a gay show, surely First Kill would fall under deliberate camp, right? Deliberate camp is usually a love letter to bad taste or a resurrection of something gaudy and outdated. For example, Andy Warhol built his career on mass-produced images of stars in decline, and the Rocky Horror Picture Show was a tongue-in-cheek tribute to trashy B-movies of the 1950s. First Kill is in a great position to do just that. The paranormal romance genre is over a decade past its prime. First Kill is clearly largely inspired by Twilight and the Vampire Diaries and could create an exaggerated but loving ode to monster-loving teens. But there is no aestheticization, no exaggeration, no self-awareness, and there's a general lack of playfulness. Everything is played dead straight, no pun intended. Though there are a couple of moments that could be read as camp, most notably Juliet's dad eating her grandma because she pisses him off, complete with the worst special effects I've seen since 2004. I don't know if this scene was intended to be camp, did they know the special effects would come out so bad? Either way, with only a couple of these ridiculously campy moments, they actually feel kind of out of place in an 8-episode show, which otherwise takes itself surprisingly seriously. It feels like a mistake rather than deliberate camp. There's also no love letter to bad taste in First Kill. In fact, the show is desperately trying to seem elevated. The characters are constantly referencing Shakespeare, and the show is trying very hard to sell itself as a retelling of Romeo and Juliet.
Ancient grudge. Sounds familiar.
The main characters supposedly read a lot. Ben and Juliet read the bell jar as children in a flashback, and Cal's reading Their Eyes Were Watching God. These pretensions made to flatter the audience and make them feel like they're watching something more highbrow than they really are actually characteristics of kitsch, not camp. Kitsch is a term which 20th century modernists used for failed art failing to move you, but trying to trick you into thinking it did. Kitsch causes two tears to flow in quick succession. The first tear says, "How nice to see children running on the grass." The second tear says, "How nice to be moved together with all mankind by children running on the grass." Kitsch is the second tier, and arguably what First Kill wants us to feel. "How nice to see lesbian representation," followed by, "How nice it is to be moved with all of gay Twitter by lesbian representation." That's sentimentality, a fantasy of emotion without the real cost of feeling it. In interviews, V.E. Schwab constantly references Supernatural and Buffy as inspiration for the show. The professed goal is to fix what Schwab disliked about them, and the very title sequence tells us this romance will be better than Twilight.
Our love is deeper than Edward and Bella.
This is not a love letter to paranormal romance. This is an attempt to outdo and elevate above their predecessors. It also means that First Kill is trying to use an old genre not with a layer of camp irony and self-awareness, but with complete sincerity, yet without any real depth, which again makes it kitsch. Another attribute of deliberate camp is a double-coded meaning, where the insiders get a special witty message and the outsiders get a different, more impersonal message. A massive part of the appeal of drag, for example, is its use of insider humour, which affirms community solidarity. But as we've already shown, First Kill doesn't actually know how to talk to a gay audience and contains no gay sensibilities, let alone cleverly concealed double meanings and winks.
I didn't even know that was possible.
Camp is also known for challenging gender, but First Kill refuses to do that in any way and defaults to the Hollywood standards of conventionally attractive, beautiful, feminine women. And that's not to say femme lesbians can't be campy. It just requires deliberation and commentary on the artifice of gender. Look at But I'm a Cheerleader and its hilarious take on gender roles being forcibly imposed on us. And if we're talking about performativity, vampires have infinite potential for camp humor and commentary. Imagine a version of First Kill about a lesbian teen vampire who has to pretend to be human with her human gay friends and pretend to be straight with her vampire family because she's not out to either of them. Imagine if Calliope and Juliet became a couple without each knowing the other is a vampire or a monster hunter. Their families could befriend each other and have regular dinners together without knowing the truth about each other. Imagine the shenanigans. We could literally have had The Birdcage with lesbians and vampires. And what could be more Shakespearean than a camp comedy of errors? Fuck, I want to make that now. I want to make that show. Don't steal my idea, but give me money. A comedy would also be more in line with where we are in the trend cycle of vampire media, like What We Do in the Shadows, which is a loving satire and actually quite queer.
Some of my wives were girl wives, some of them were gay wives.
So First Kill is not deliberate camp, but could it maybe be naive camp, so bad it actually ends up being good? Sontag reminds us that not all failed art is camp. When something's bad rather than camp, it's often because it is too mediocre in its ambition. The artist hasn't attempted to do anything really outlandish. There isn't actually any artistic ambition to First Kill. The show doesn't even attempt to give us a semi-fresh twist on vampires. The only goal is mediocre stuff we've seen a million times before, but now with more lesbians. And most importantly, First Kill isn't any type of camp, because there is no style, no artifice, no exaggeration and aestheticization to it. A part of the appeal of a paranormal lover is usually that they come from like a cool, mysterious world. They live in a house where you would want to live, whether it's an old mansion or a fancy modern house. The Fairmonts unironically live in a McMansion. Look at Juliet's room. This is supposed to be a teenage vampire's room. An IKEA catalogue has more personality than this and is easily more gay. And if you're trying to tell us the Fairmonts are bland, tasteless, rich Americans, then you should really go for it. I want to see a Donald Trump interior. I want a gold toilet. I want a house so gaudy, it's a parody of itself. But they just have this basic approach to the setting, which also extends to the city, Savannah.
Setting is never just a backdrop in a story. It's a character.
It is absolutely setting as character. These places have history and have nuance and have personality.
But this is just the kitsch talking, trying to convince you the show is doing more than it is. Despite having one of the most sultry and nocturnally spooky looking cities in the southern United States as its location, neither the directors nor the cinematographer managed to translate that vibe into a single frame of the series. There's clearly been an executive note to steer clear of anything sumptuous, sensuous, or scary. For camp, you need an exaggerated style. This show doesn't even have a style. It could be set in any American city and be any genre on television, which is especially outrageous after True Blood proved you can not only set a visually stunning vampire show in the south of the US, but also root it there culturally in a way where the story couldn't take place anywhere else. And it's not just the visuals and the culture, True Blood also sounds like the south of the US. People have accents, the soundtrack is country, everything is cohesive. In First Kill, it sounds to me like the only person in the show with a southern accent is the definitely not homophobic Karen, Bunny. Camp can also be a deliberate mode of consumption, a curated taste. If you go to a flea market and find the ugliest clock you've ever seen and it makes you go,
"This clock is so fucking hideous, I love it,"
and you buy it, you've made the clock camp. But what I've mostly seen online is, First Kill's not bad, it's just camp. A statement which completely misunderstands the whole point of camp. Sontag distills camp into a simple statement. It's good because it's awful. And to be honest, I think even the most dedicated and ironic curators of bad taste would have a hard time enjoying First Kill as camp because it's simply not enough. It's not weird enough, it's not passionate enough, it's not aesthetically interesting enough, and the fuck-ups are not funny or bewildering enough. They're just lazy and cheap. Rather than create a new show with an exciting new concept, First Kill is just old idea but lesbian. And that's fine. I'm happy for you if you enjoyed it. Personally, I don't think that's the kind of representation we need. I think we need quality programming. Give us something groundbreaking, something fresh. And if you want to give us something mediocre, then actually give us something mediocre and not something so underfunded it feels like it was made by amateurs. V.E. Schwab said, "For years we've learned to tolerate queerbaiting and settle for subtext, reading between the lines of what creators will not put in dialogue or action. We accept crumbs while others feast. We content ourselves with simply showing up on screen and throw a celebration when we aren't killed off at the end of a season, let alone a show. But this show has very subtextual queerness, at least homophobia. This show was crumbs, 8 episodes on a budget of like $12. We contented ourselves with simply showing up on screen, and we all celebrated because they weren't killed off at the end of the season. Cheap television is the real activism. Andy Warhol once said, "I always like to work on leftovers. Things that were discarded and that everybody knew were no good, I always thought had a great potential to be funny. If you can take it and make it good, or at least interesting, then you're not wasting as much as you would otherwise. That's a very economical operating procedure." First Kill had great potential to be camp and clever and fun because it's using leftovers from a trashy, outdated genre. But unlike Warhol, First Kill doesn't understand that you have to make leftovers funny or interesting. There is no attempt at transformation. It's not ironically recycling, it's just copying, and copying badly. It doesn't add value that real camp would offer. It's just cheap to make. And we all watch it because we love those gay crumbs. And this is why, even though First Kill fails both at being camp and at being serious, it was still a great investment for Netflix, who takes our money and gives us the cheapest, shoddiest show while spending tens of millions on transphobic comedy specials. Remember, this isn't activism. This isn't charity. Netflix is a product we pay for, and this is how they're spending our money. Enjoy the rubbishness of this show if you can, and if you want to. But if you loved First Kill, you should demand a second season with a much bigger budget. Give them a big budget, bring in new people who know what they're doing, fix the scripts and the bloody audio, and just avoid showing so many clogs. We can do so much better than this. But if this is what we settle for, this is all we're ever gonna get. And I think we deserve better. I think lesbians deserve better. Thank you for watching. Please check out our videos detailing the history of the lesbian vampire and the bisexual history of Dracula. Please like and subscribe and consider supporting my Patreon. Thank you so much to my patrons for your support, and a special thanks, an extra special thanks to Eric Parkinson, Angela, Corwin Found, Fluffy Bunny Boo, Gamer Guy J, Gwenda Euphoria, Helena Varvarusis, Joe Liss, Juliana Baca, Machina Ex Domina, Mia Nilo, Metheta, Non-Anonymous, Norberto Ochoa, Siobhan, Stephen Wallace, Tasha Heim, Wix, Abigail Eckstein, Aaron, Alice Lovell, Alina Vera, Amelia D, Anya Stephen, Anna S, Apathetic Gaiety, Arden, Artemix, Avery, Avriotta, B, Ben Hengst, Bestlaff, Beth Hershey, By Ronnie, Break Every Yoke, Bump Girl, Kane Friedman, Katrina Lexi, Charis Edwards, Claire, Comfort and Adam, Connor Thompson, Deanna McMillan, Dorothy, Dropout Ninja, Eden Ladley, Erie Enby, Ellie Cannard, Elsie Astro, Emery James Fairgrieve, Eve Griffith, Evergarden Wall, Fancy Angles, Felixer of Life, Gabriella Day, Gavin Salmon, Gerard Brenter, Ghosts and You Might Die, Ginger, Grace Robertson, Grisala Farben, Hackneyed Edits, Hirundo, Hope Wrights, Jackie Queen of Thieves, Jam Kwasowski, Jennifer Fronister, Jessage, Gillian D, Joit, Joe McManus, Jules Inkwell, Julio Mendez, Julius Sarwin, Juniper Lopez, Cafe Mewtwo, Kale, Kate and Jess, Katie B, Katie Bollinger, Katya, Kate Serra, Kailani Garcia, Kelly Flynn, Kisa, Kyle Denley, Lee Hedstrom, Lindsay Mercer, Lisa Spitalovitz, Lumpy Llama, Marla, Math Class Warfare, McKenning Wood, Mike Bucket, Miss Mad, Mizaka Demizan, Mugsy, Moshe Gordon Radian, Murunmai Salil, Mirren McGlynn, Neve, Nico, Nick Snary, Nina, Noe, Ossian Matthew, Panny Lynn, Pseudo Pac-Man, Queer Aesthetic, Radical Planning, Rebecca Peacock, River Haddock, Rock the Shell, Sabina Ahrensberger, Sarah R, Zoya Donk, Shockstopia, Shaved Headed By, Sean, She Algorithm, Simon Patience, Sithvich, Soy, Straw Fox, Summertime Killer, Susie S, Taya Quinn, The Children of Jack Acid, Thomas Oshagan Halajan, Tia Till, Tina Gigya, Tom Harrison, Troy Zaire, Verlux, Vicious Panda, Vince Whitaker, Wandering Sock, Wards, Will O'Connor, Jonathan Zunga and Yuli Themstead. Let's watch this again. Let's just do it. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. Look at it.